Hello students, this is Mr. Hancock here, and we are on lesson 2 in geography, so hopefully we're starting out the new year right. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to be showing you basically the class layout. I didn't have a lot of time to do that before, and then I will get into lesson 2 and then have it there. So every Wednesday there will be what I call a flipped class, or a recorded class that I will send out. So since you found this, you know what's going on. So just kind of coming here, once you go to the class homepage, you scroll down, and as you're scrolling down, you'll see the announcements. Okay, that's where I posted lesson 1, as you can see right there. So you can just go click that, watch that if you happen to miss it or jumped into the class late. And then you have a calendar here that kind of shows when everything is due and coming up. That is also available in the plan section of this, which I'll show you in a second. But if we look here, you see I have the geography flipped class here on Wednesday. And so that will be emailed out to you and posted to the announcement board. And then today we have our lesson quiz due. So or lesson 1 quiz due. So if you go up and you watch this video, our first live lesson, that is where you'll find the content for that. Now what we're going to be going over today is what's in lesson 2 quiz, which is not due till Monday, and then we have of course our live class on Monday. So a couple things real quick about the content here. If you click plan real quick and go over here, this is going to give you that same layout as the Google Calendar did. It just kind of updates you through the OLS of what's going to be happening and what needs to be done. If you go into the content, so the content, if we go to Unit 1, because we're in Unit 1, as you can see it's laid out Lesson 1, Lesson 2, Lesson 3. So we already went over Lesson 1. You go through these modules right here, and then there's a quiz that you need to take for lesson 1, which is due today. Lesson 2, you see, click on that, go through those modules. We'll be going through some of that stuff in class today, but not everything, so you'll want to go through the modules and then go to lesson 2 quiz. Okay, and remember, you can take the quizzes as many times as you like to get your desired score. So let's get into the lesson real quick. And of course, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach me. You can call, text, or email me. I'm good with any one there. Alright, so today what we're going to be going over, as I said, lesson 2. So unit 1 is basically an introduction to geography. So basically we're going to show where we are in space, and then we're going to talk about physical attributes of the Earth as a whole. And then our next unit, we're actually going to be going down and looking at certain sections within the Earth, or regions. So North America, Central America, South America, and Europe. And that's what the class covers. Here are our class or our objectives that it will show throughout the modules. So I'm not going to read all those. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about just kind of where are we. Okay, we are the third planet from what we know as the sun, our sun, and we're the third planet there. Of course, we have Mercury, Venus, Mars, those areas, and so we're the third one there. There's only a certain amount of habitable zone within this, and we are luckily in that habitable zone, or we wouldn't be here. We have our Earth. What we have done is we have broken that down into what's called hemispheres. Okay, and so we kind of split those up here. So we have the western, we have something called the equator that runs across there horizontally. Okay, and that's called the equator. It kind of splits the Earth into two. And once we run that equator through there, you have what's north of the equator is called the northern hemisphere. What's south of the equator is called the southern hemisphere. You also have another line that we call the prime meridian that runs vertical, and that splits the Earth into two hemispheres as well. Anything west of the prime meridian is called the Western Hemisphere. Anything east is called the Eastern Hemisphere. And then we also have, hopefully you've learned these already, your cardinal directions, right? North, east, south, west. And then you also have your other directions like northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. So that brings us to a quick question here. Which of these is incorrect? Northwest, east-west, southeast, or southwest? I kind of hear this sometimes, but you always use north or south first in it. So the incorrect answer would be east-north. Doesn't even sound right when I say it. So, all right. So we talked about some of those lines before already. We have the equator, right, that runs horizontally across. We have the prime meridian that runs vertically over there. And then we have lines of what we call latitude and lines of longitude, okay? The way I remember these is think of latitude like a ladder, like you have to climb a ladder. So as you start with the equator, you kind of work your way up, okay? And then kind of work your way down, kind of like a ladder. And then longitude are the ones that go and run through each of the poles there. All right, here's a quick little snapshot video that helps me as well as some others kind of remember this. Okay, sorry, I can't remember if my thing is on, so I'll just shoot you out the video if you want to watch it. It's pretty simple there. Also, a couple other things about the Earth. One, we have seasons because we're in Utah. So we have a couple things here. So we have what's called rotation, okay? As the Earth spins around, that's what creates our days and our nights, okay? We also have what's called a tilt. And so the tilt is at 23.5 degrees. And that actually what makes our seasons as we're kind of going around in relation to the sun. We have something called an axis that has each of our poles. So we have the North Pole, right, where Santa Claus is, and the South Pole. And that basically is just imaginary lines, but it kind of tells us where those are in relation to things. We also have revolution, which is another key word. So revolution basically is revolving around the sun. And so it takes 365 and a fourth day to get around the sun. And so that's why we actually have leap years. We have that little fourth day there. Okay. Some other things they want me to kind of go over with you real quickly is one, you've probably heard this a little bit, but you have continental drift. So the continents are always moving. They're on plates is what they call them. And we'll kind of get into those plates and why they're important in later lessons and why we maybe have some earthquakes and volcanoes and stuff like that. But at one point in time, we had a place called Pangaea or Pangaea. It's pronounced a couple different ways. But basically, all of the continents were in one. And with that continental drift and shift, it's kind of changed around and made into the continents we know as of today. Okay, next thing we're going to be going over, physical attributes of the landscape. Okay. So we have a little test question here. So basically, which of the following is not responsible to determine the climate or long-term weather conditions of a region? Okay. So think about that real quick. So in Utah, right, we are cold in the winter because we're higher what? We're higher also in elevation, okay? So we're high in the mountains, so that can cause, above sea level. Lines of latitude. Remember what lines of latitude is, like how far away you are from the equator. Now let's think about the equator. Are we far? Is it warm around the equator? or is it not? Okay, so think about that. And then lines of longitude. Okay, lines of longitude are the ones that just kind of run from pole to pole. And then the other one is currents. Okay, like ocean currents is what they're talking about. So basically, does warm water come in, and does that affect what your climate is? Okay. And so the correct answer is actually C. Lines of longitude do not affect climate. Okay. So all those other things that we talked about do affect climate. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Earth's structure real quick. Okay. So the Earth's structure has different spheres, is what they're called. Okay. So you have the lithosphere, which is your solid Earth. Over here to your right, you have the atmosphere, which is all your gases and the air that we breathe. We have the biosphere, which is the earth life on it, so plants, animals. And then you have the hydrosphere, which is your water that's found in the air, in the ocean, and then also underneath the land. Okay. And so they're all important part of the ecosystem that's developed for the Earth. So if we were to go and we were to cut into the Earth, this is what we'd find. Okay, at the very center, we'd find a solid core. It's a solid magnetic core, and that's how we can use like compasses and stuff like that. You also have on the outer lanes some molten Earth, and sometimes that molten Earth actually comes up and develops what's called hot spots, just like a big hot spot around here is Yellowstone, right, where you see all those geysers and everything like that. Another one is the mantle, and then you also have the crust where we live on. Some other attributes that we have, we talked about Pangea, but we also have all our different continents, right? That are spread out here, and we'll be going over some of those continents in this class and what it's like there and all that stuff. But you have what's called plates, okay? And over here to the right, I have different plate boundaries that kind of come up there. And they're shifting and they're moving over time. And as I said, we'll talk more about those as we go into the different areas. Another thing we need to think about is what is it like the water cycle and how that affects things. So hopefully you've learned this throughout your education career, but you have water that evaporates and makes clouds when the clouds get big enough and they can't go over things like the mountains. So I think most of you probably live along the Wasatch Front, so basically meaning like Brigham City to Santaquin area. A lot of the water that we get is from not being able to, the clouds not being able to go over the mountains, and so they have to drop their precipitation, right? And then that kind of goes in there, and that's how we get a lot of rain over here. Or Utah would be drier than what it is, okay? Some of the biggest lakes in the world are actually the Great Lakes, and we'll be discussing how that affects things in northern North America when we get to that chapter or that unit. Okay, so which lakes are the largest freshwater lakes in North America? Okay, so I already kind of talked a little bit about them just a second ago, but Lake Tahoe is a man-made lake. Lake Powell is also a man-made lake. The Great Lakes are not man-made lakes, and the Great Salt Lake is, as we know, a salty lake, so that does not affect it. So basically the answer is the Great Lakes. Okay, the last thing we're going to be going over, okay, as we're talking about different seasons and what it's like climate-wise in each area, you'll see that we have by the equator, wherever the equator runs through, it's called the tropics, okay? 23.5 degrees north and 23.5 degrees south is what's called our lines, or our tropics. So we have our Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And in between those are the really nice areas that I love to go to vacation to. For example, like Belize or the Caribbean islands, those kind of things. So that's what you kind of think about. And then also most of your deserts are in there, like the Sahara Desert, all those deserts. Maybe think of like Africa kind of thing. Also your tropical rainforests. As you start going north or south of the equators, you'll find what's called your mid latitudes. That's where you're going to have all 4 seasons. You'll have, like Utah, we have summer, winter, fall, spring, and we get to enjoy all of those. As you go farther north, they'll only have like 2 seasons, either summer or winter, and that's where you're like Arctic, the Arctic Circle, that kind of stuff area. And there's different vegetation that you will see on each of those. Okay, so that kind of goes over the physical characteristics and what it's like here on Earth. So you'll want to go through, and this will be the information on your quiz. Okay, so quiz number 2. So when you go in to do quiz number 2, you'll go through all of these after watching this video. Take quiz number 2. And then if you don't get the score you want, you can retake that for that. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And you can watch these videos at your leisure, but you want to make sure you get it done on the pacing guide. So thank you for your time. We'll speak with you later.